we have some guests here. Just some quick housekeeping stuff, and then we'll go, I'll introduce the guests, and we'll go from there. So I know many of you have taken the midterm. Whoever hasn't taken the midterm, for whatever reason, you need to communicate that with Professor Phelps. If you're going to email both of us. But if you're going to go by our office, square that up so she can address it. I know several of you already have taken the makeup because you weren't able to be here. Secondly, you have about 3 major assessments left in the course. The documentary analysis, 1 more in-class exam, and then your final. Everything, bless you. Everything is weighted, which means that you just don't take 5 assignments, multiply and divide and all that. No, we don't do it that way. So the way it looks, your remaining assessments have the most weight. So your documentary analysis and your next exam in class can give you over 50 points of your grade. That's half your grade day. So despite where you may have stood on your midterms, you have enough room to build it back up. Secondly, we tend to give extra credit assignments at times when things occur on campus or in the event that I'm in school because I'm obligated to do something else. In those events, you may have another opportunity to have extra credit. So my point is, midterms is just an assessment of the first half of the semester. What you put into it moving forward is how you finish it out. So, for many of you, this information is quite overwhelming. It's a lot, I get that. It's still going to be a lot, but the second half of the chapter is different because the information is a little bit lighter. Then, registration. So my upperclassmen kind of know the routine. For my newer students, you eventually have to register again for the spring. Ensure that you meet with your faculty advisors, your first year advisors, so you can get your pins and schedule the courses that are in line with your major. If you're a justice studies major, then make sure you're taking courses that are going to help you. You're still taking gen ed. Make sure, take ownership of your academics here. You only need 3 classes in critical thinking, 1 class in critical reading, 2 classes in both the sciences and the math. If you end up coming to me your junior year and you have 5 classes in math and science, I'm going to look at you like, what were you doing? You're wasting your time and money. Take ownership. How do you know what you're supposed to take? It's online. Find the gen ed matrix if you haven't been provided one already, and stick to it. So when your advisor says, here, take this class because I think it's great and it's interesting. And you'd be like, nah, son, I already took 3 critical thinking. Own it. Don't cry to us when you get to your junior year. Oh my God, I took 7 classes. I'm going to say, well, what were you doing? Take ownership. College is about taking ownership. Yes? All right, we shall see. Oh, there was one more thing. So, that being said, attendance is coming around there, just sign up. So, we're privileged. And I say that kind of like tongue-in-cheek. We're privileged because we have some visitors today who are close and near and dear to our department. And my colleague, Dr. Nation, most importantly, has taken a leadership role in helping them. I say tongue-in-cheek because they're here because it's an unfortunate situation. Granted, I adore the relationship, but it's because of some injustices that has occurred in the state of North Carolina. If you followed your syllabus, you would see that today we're talking about sentencing and the death penalty. Fortunately, we're not dealing with that. We're dealing with sentencing. And in doing so, we have an individual here who's closely aligned to a man by the name of Ronnie Long, a native North Carolinian, who was treated unjustly, has been treated unjustly, for over 40 years now. Incarcerated, wrongful. You see that? You see the Facebook page? I know you guys don't really do Facebook. But if you do, add them, follow them, you know, and you're actually going to have the pleasure of hearing from him. Obviously, his wife is here, Miss Ashley Long. She's a sweetheart. She's a fighter. And her colleague, Maurice and Fred, who's going to talk a little bit about their visits to Ronnie Long and some of the justices. One thing I do with my portion of the course is that I bring a lot of people from the outside in to supplement what we learn in the books. Because, I mean, doggone it, the book says one thing, but the reality is another. So, I'm going to shut up, because I probably won't do it any more justice than I've tried already. I'm going to let Ashley, are you ready? Are you not ready?
Yeah. He's going to call when he can.
Maurice going to help her out. She got some items I'm going to pass out. Give her your undivided attention, and then we'll go from there. Listen up, y'all.
Okay,
So he's actually going to call in, so you're actually going to hear him and speak to him.
yeah, he'll
He'll call in when he's able to call in.
Yeah, the prison, they get the phones, you know, when the prison guards feel like opening up the phone lines for him. So anyways, whenever he calls, we'll just stop and let him talk. So Ronnie Long is from Concord, North Carolina. He is a black man, and he was wrongfully convicted of raping a really prominent white widow who's connected to the Cannon Mills family. After doing some research, like in North Carolina, the Cannon Mills family is pretty powerful family here. They're still politicians that are connected to the family. And as you'll see, his case is really more political than it is criminal, because to this day, the state of North Carolina has no evidence that linked him to the crimes. Yet he is in prison still. He was taken into custody on May 10th, 1976. He was 20 years old. He actually had his 21st birthday in the Cabarrus County Jail awaiting trial. And he just missed the death penalty because the legislation had just changed sentencing from death to life in prison for first-degree rape and first-degree burglary. So, anyway, so Ronnie was, it would be April 25th. This rape occurred at 9:30 p.m. and in the woman's home on Union Street. It's one of the Cannon houses. Ronnie was at his family's home about 2 miles away on the phone with his girlfriend and his young son. His mother was on the phone downstairs. Unfortunately, in 76, phone records are not available. So there's his alibi, and the prosecutor kind of tore his mom apart on the stand as well. There's 8 children in the family, and when she was on the stand, she couldn't remember Ronnie's birthday, so they use it against her, basically saying she was, not a reliable alibi or anything. But if anyone's ever going to testify, especially when your son's life is on the line, it's kind of nerve-wracking. So I can understand that. So this woman was attacked at 9:30 p.m. in her home. Ronnie was in his house. After the phone call, he listened to some music. He was waiting on the shared family car from his father. When his father arrived home, he took the shared car and drove to Charlotte, where he remained until the next morning. This is important, and I stress the shared car because items were allegedly found in this car that Ronnie, still to this day, says, are not his. So, anyway, back to April. So, on May 3rd, the 3 officers went to the victim's home and told her that they had reason to believe the person who did this to her would be in court on May 10th. Ronnie had a misdemeanor trespassing charge that he had to go to court for on May 10th. So, you see that was one contamination of the witness for the detectives to go to her house and say that. Then, on May 10th, the same detectives went to the victim's house, picked her up, and put her in a disguise. She wore a wig, a hat, sunglasses, and a trench coat, and sat in the courtroom for over 2 hours before Ronnie's case was called. Then Ronnie and his father went up to the judge, and his case was dismissed, and he left. That's when allegedly the victim identified Ronnie. Again, she sat in there for over 2 hours, and there was no one else in the courtroom that really matched Ronnie's characteristics, which he didn't line up. And he was also the only person wearing a black leather jacket in the courtroom that day. So then, immediately after, the detectives took the victim to the police station and then showed her a photo lineup where obviously she would have picked out Ronnie's photo because she just saw him in court. And the strange thing about this is that they had a mugshot photo of Ronnie from his misdemeanor trespass charge as of April 30th. So, and this woman is 52 years old at the time. So why would you risk taking an elderly, victim to court to be where this alleged person, who might have attacked her would be, rather than just showing her a photo lineup? You know what I mean? Doesn't make any sense. So then Ronnie's case was dismissed, and he went back home to do whatever. Later that evening, Concord police came to his house and said that they needed to finish up some paperwork for his dismissed trespassing charge. Ronnie's mother asked them specifically, "Do I need to come with them? Does he need?" They said no. It'll be really quick. So Ronnie voluntarily got into his father's car, the shared family car, and drove to the police station, and that's where they took him into custody. Now, when they were interviewing him, they started asking about this rape, and he was like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." His keys were sitting on the table, and they said, "Are these your keys?" He said, "Yeah." And Detective Eisenhower took his keys and went down to his car. A few minutes later, he came back up with this bright green toboggan, leather gloves, and he set them on the table. And he said, "Are these yours?" And Ronnie said, "Well, those gloves are mine, but that toboggan's not mine." And Eisenhower claimed, he stated that he found the toboggan in the car underneath the seat, and Ronnie's like, "No, you didn't." And that's why I stress the shared car, because Ronnie, his father, and his brothers all drove that vehicle. And the victim also in her testimony says that the perpetrator was wearing a dark color toboggan. And bright green's kind of a lot different than a dark color toboggan. Just, throwing that out there. So, and Ronnie, unfortunately, being 20 years old and never having dealt with the police before, he was taught you're supposed to do what you're told. They had a consent to search form for his vehicle. They told him, if you want your stuff back, you just have to sign this line. And of course, he's 20 years old, he doesn't read it, so he signs it, which is, the consent to search his vehicle. So that kind of screwed him there. So fast forward, May 10th was when he was taken in custody. His trial was in the end of September. It lasted only a week, and he was convicted on October 1st, which his current attorneys, when I reached out to them, said was very, it kind of stuck out to them, because somebody that carries a life sentence, you wouldn't think it would only take about 6 months, for them to be charged, convicted, and sentenced and everything. And during the time that Ronnie was awaiting trial, there was actually rioting and protesting going on in Concord, so much so that the city enforced a curfew, and the National Guard was brought in. So history repeating itself, if you think about what's happening today. And after his conviction, his supporters were beat and sprayed with pepper spray inside of the courtroom, and there's like a 2-second clip of that on one of the videos we have. One of the news interviews that he's had over the years. So after he was convicted, having no criminal record, he was taken to Central Prison, which is the worst prison in the state. And having been there for less than a week, he saw a man stabbed to death right in front of him outside the cell. So he says he felt like God had him when he said to realize just really how serious situation he was in. Now, he was offered a plea deal prior to trial, where he could have just done 7 years. But Ronnie, he said, "I was raised, my father told us we're not supposed to, say we did something we didn't do." And he honestly didn't think he would be convicted because he did not rape this woman. So unfortunately, he didn't take the plea deal, and he was convicted, and they gave him 2 life sentences. Now, the burglary charge came because the woman said that, "I think I had $15 in my purse." So that was the first-degree burglary charge, yep. She said, "I think I had $15 in my purse." So that's how he got first-degree burglary, first-degree rape. And like I said, he carries a life sentence. In 1976, the life sentence was defined as 80 years. And back when Governor Perdue was the governor, in a political move, she denied Ronnie Long and 134 other inmates their gain time or good time, which is like good credit, because she said that she would go to jail, before she releases these heinous criminals, and she lost anyway, so it didn't help her. But it's called the vote-in list because there's one inmate who's been fighting it. So it's one option we're waiting on, but it's kind of long out there, and that would be him getting released just on his time and still being convicted felon. There's one. Oh.
An inmate at Albemarle Correctional Institution. This call will be monitored and recorded. For customer assistance, thank you for using Global Tel Link.
Hey, you're on speakerphone with the class, okay?
Yeah.
You have to speak loud because we don't have a microphone.
I wanna
want to thank what's Salem State family, shooter body for 9 years. My wife is up for you to bring my issue. I don't know where to start. Somebody, said you want to ask me any questions, anything you want to say, you feel so deep clarified. I will do my best to clarify whatever question you ask.
I just started talking, Ronnie, so you can tell him whatever.
I'm gonna start.
Yeah, start.
Go ahead.
Where you want me to start? You want me to start from the beginning? You want me to tell you, understand what's happening with me now? You want to hear about the injustice that's been done, by the criminal justice system here in the state of North Carolina?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In 76, I was picked up as a suspect. Well, I wasn't picked up. Matter of fact, I voluntarily drove to the police station. And it was 2 in the morning of May the 10th. And they had me on some kind of misdemeanor trespassing charge. And the trespassing charge was manifested from an incident that happened in Caldwell Park. A palm is attended to my backyard. And so when I was in court, I was supposed to be identified in court by the victim in this case. She sat in the courtroom for over an hour and a half before she identified me. What I understand is there's only 11 blacks in the courtroom at this time. The state didn't have any fillers. The photo that she saw, I was the only man in the photo, wearing a leather jacket. The perpetrator in the crime was supposedly wore a leather jacket. During this time in 1976, leather jacket, leather, was a fad in more or less the black community in 1976. She was saying that I was the perpetrator of the crime. The identification that she gave the police on the night of the crime, she identified the victim, the perpetrator, as being a high yellow individual. Let me assure you that I'm not high yellow. The police, I drove my car down to the police station. Well, it's my father's car. I drove my father's car down to the police station. Thinking they wanted me downtown, just because they told me they wanted me downtown to sign the paper to the trespassing matter. I go downtown, they tell me I'm a suspect in a burglary case. They go outside, they come back in, they say they got some items out of my car, which was a leather jacket, some gloves, and a lime green toboggan. The identification that the woman gave me the perpetrator, she said the perpetrator wore a dark colored toboggan. They got a lime green toboggan with red hair in the toboggan in his face. Had denied me numerous times. I had a DNA test. My lawyers that I was with at the time were from UNC, Actual Innocent Project. And they came up with evidence that the state had been withheld, that the state had withheld for over 30 years. I didn't find out about the evidence until 2005. They had been holding the evidence, FBI reports, that they had from 1976. I found out about it in 2005. The jury pool that was summoned to the courtroom in 76 for me to pick a panel from was ran through names that he stated he knew personally. Out of the 50 people that was summoned for jury, I had 2 blacks. In the pool, I had 13 whites on my panel. My lawyers appealed to squash the whole pool, but the jury denied me, saying that they were not going to go back and pick another whole jury panel, the whole jury pool. That I had to pick my panel from the 50 that was selected to go down, to come downtown. And these 50 were selected by the chief of police. The evidence custodian in this case, Dan Eisenhower, withheld evidence, committed perjury. I got documentation to prove that the evidence custodian committed perjury or testified in 1976. Later, that he convicted himself for stealing checks through the U.S. Postal Service. He served federal time for stealing checks from the U.S. Postal Service. My case go before the North Carolina Supreme Court. I've been fighting numerous appeals. Ever since 76, I've been fighting the criminal justice system in Cabarrus County on numerous appeals. My case go before the North Carolina Supreme Court where there's 7 judges. Those 7 judges, 3 ruled against me, 3 ruled in my favor to grant me a new trial. 1 refrained from even casting a vote on decision. Now, me and my lawyers, we talked about whether or not we could compel this judge to make a decision. And we chose not to on the strength, we chose not to because if I feel as though when we tried to compel him to make a decision, he would probably rule against me. And it would have been a unanimous vote, which would have been 4-3. So what I chose to do, go into the federal system on a 3-3 tie. I got evidence to prove that a Sergeant Marshall Lee from the Concord Police Department picked up and signed for all biological evidence that were connected to this case. From there, I mean, Sergeant Marshall Lee picked the evidence of the biological evidence from Northeast Medical Center. The evidence disappeared. We don't know where the evidence is. Don't nobody know where the evidence is. We done tried to find the evidence. The woman that they have me incarcerated for is a very, very wealthy woman, individual, who has political ties in Congress. It's an ex-congressman named Robert Hayes, who's said to be the victim's nephew. I got documentation to prove that physical evidence was collected from the crime scene on the night that the crime was supposed to take place, sent to the FBI lab, and turned out to be negative toward the evidence that they compared it to concerning me. The state will want you to believe that on the crime scene, suspect's house was found in the exact same place I've been in the struggle with the judicial system in Cabarrus County, North Carolina, and its political figures do not have any respect for the constitutions. They can use the constitutions to incarcerate you, but you can't use those same constitutions to free yourself. I got overwhelming evidence to prove my innocence, but that don't mean nothing to no state court here in the state of North Carolina. I put the DA on the stand that tried me in 76 in 2009 to testify for me, stating that the state withheld exculpatory evidence that could prove my innocence. Okay, let's just say he's guilty. Hypothetically, say that, okay, I'm guilty. Your 5th and 14th Amendment under the U.S. Constitution guarantees you due process, equal protection under law. If I'm guilty, I still have a right to a fair trial. I have evidence that a jury has never, ever heard. In the state of North Carolina, continues to withhold evidence. In 2015, the Innocent Crime Commission found 64 fingerprints that were collected from the crime scene that I didn't know nothing about, didn't even know existed until 2015.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
The DA stands before a Superior Court judge and lied, saying that I had all the evidence that they had, and there was no more evidence in this case. Sergeant Ledwell from the Norfolk Police Department also testified that there was no more evidence. And then in 2015, they said 2009, they testified that there was no more evidence.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
But in 2015, I come up with 64 fingerprints that were collected from the crime scene, and now one matched my prints. My prints were nowhere in this house. And these people still refuse to hear my cry for justice, my appeal for justice.
Are you going to call back for questions?
I'm a child.
Okay. All right. So,
All right, so what we do, so you got the gist of it. You see the passion. I mean, this is the real deal. Ask him questions. You know, he's transparent, so ask him. I mean, keep it on target, but he's pretty open, so ask him questions. He loves to engage with you. Y'all give him life, man, so just engage with him.
and while we wait for him to call back, so basically, Ronnie has been screwed in every way possible by the state of North Carolina. He's been through like every innocence organization in North Carolina. We have the National Innocence Project, who's assisting his current attorneys. They recently did an article just regarding the eyewitness identification of his case. And still to this day, it's like, okay, so UNC Innocence Project had his case. They found the first batch of exculpatory evidence. They got him to the North Carolina Supreme Court. There was a tie decision. The assistant DA who prosecuted him in 76 testified on his behalf, stating in his opinion Ronnie did not receive a fair trial and this evidence was not turned over to him. Now, fast forward to today, I've actually tried to reach out to the same assistant DA, and somebody must have got to him before me, because now, when I reach out to him, he's like, what do you want? Who are you? And I was like, well, I'm just, calling about your testimony from Supreme Court, and, well, you can read my testimony. I think he's guilty. So I was like, oh, that's interesting, because I'll go ahead and send you a copy of your own testimony. So, and because he said he was subpoenaed by the state, why would you, well, actually Ronnie's attorney's husband drove you to and from court for you to testify. So why, if you were subpoenaed by the state, would we be driving you to and from court? You were subpoenaed by the defense. Thank you. So just kind of to show you like some of the screwed up things, kind of like the Innocence Inquiry Commission. It's supposed to be like a big deal. It's the only kind in the, I guess, the nation or essentially the world. But I really don't. I mean, I have nothing nice to say about the Innocence Inquiry Commission other than they found the fingerprints. To this day, those 60-some fingerprints have not been put into any national database at all. And they won't release those files to Ronnie's attorneys. They closed his case despite finding this more exculpatory evidence. They closed it in 2015, and they won't release the files. We have to get a judge's orders for those files, and I just recently found out that his attorneys still have not filed the judge's orders for those files. So it's like they know Ronnie didn't do it, but they don't want to know who did it, essentially.
You will not be charged for this call.
And
This call is from
Monell.
let him talk.
Albemarle Correctional Institution. This call will be monitored and recorded for customer assistance. Thank you for using Global Tel Link.
I want to say this. In 76, when I was in court on a misdemeanor trespassing charge, I see the same two detectives who lied, who withheld evidence, sitting in the jury box that morning, that Monday morning. My father and I, we sat in the courtroom for over an hour, hour and a half waiting for me to go before a judge. The victim in the case said that she recognized me when the judge called my name. I've been sitting in court for almost an hour and a half. She don't recognize me until the judge called my name. When he called my name, I get up and walk to the front. She says she signaled to the two detectives that were sitting in the jury box that I was her man. I was the man. She said she signaled to them, letting them know, acknowledging the fact that, yes, that's him. If she had needed me in the courtroom, why did they let me walk out, leave the courtroom, get in a car, drive all the way back home, lay down, took a nap, and woke up about 2 hours later. If I was ID in the courtroom.
Hey, tell them about your trial attorneys, what they told you.
Tell them, say it again.
Tell them about James Fuller and Carl Atkins when they told you in trial, when you're asking about your evidence.
My lawyers, James Fuller, Carl Atkins, they were supposed to be with one of the most prestigious law firms in the state of North Carolina, Julius Chambers. Julius Chambers used to sit on the board of governors at, what is it? North Carolina Central? North Carolina Central.
No, Ronnie, never, okay.
When
Okay.
I'm
Never.
talking about hell, you talking
Yeah,
about hell.
yeah.
I'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Taking forever.
Yeah, I will take it from me. I will take it. When the doctor get up on the stand and testify to all the things that he's done, I'm telling my lawyers that they took half of me. They took half of me. Why come they ain't saying nothing about that? Why come they ain't bringing this up? My lawyer look at me and tell me be a convenient suspect. And today, I'm still trying to prove my innocence. 42 years later. I lost my father. I've lost two sisters. My mother, 87 years old. My mother was she was in her 40s. They got me when I was 20 years old. I have no prior conviction. I'm not a career criminal. This is my first offense. And I'm tired. I'm 62 years old. And I'm tired. Why is my plea adjusted? Falling on deaf ears. What is it? And I'm gonna have to do to get people to recognize that I'm innocent and I'm dying in this penitentiary for no apparent reason. My case right now is in the full city, Virginia. They've been in there for 7 months. We are waiting on a decision from the full city.
That has no deadline.
It's in the Fourth Circuit Court.
Oh, yeah, his case is right now in the
Fourth
Fourth Circuit, and it's actually, they filed this federal habeas petition in January 2016, and the federal court wanted him to go back to state court, which makes no sense. It just means the federal judges don't want to do their jobs, because everyone's concerned about feelings in the courtrooms. And so we appealed that decision because they gave the decision to dismiss without prejudice, which means the doors are still open for federal court. So they want to go back to state court knowing that they won't rule for him and then go back to the federal court. So we appealed that decision about 7 months ago, and that's what we're currently waiting on. And when I said there's no deadline, there's no deadline for the Fourth Circuit to respond to our appeal, so essentially they could keep him waiting indefinitely. So they kind of have his case in a perfect spot. Okay, we're going to do questions, Ronnie. I'll just walk through this. I'm walking over.
So, hi, my name is Angela Lynn, and one of my questions was that after you got arrested, did they do a rape kit on the girl? And the scratches that I read in your article, did they ever confirm those scratches on your body?
Yeah, like if there's scratches on you or your jacket. Yeah, from her struggling.
Questions, comments? questions, comments, anything? For Ronnie?
Well, and keep in mind, the picture you can't really see too well, but Ronnie was, I mean, he's still handsome now, but, you know, he was a good-looking young man, and he had a girlfriend, and some other friends. So, I mean, he had no business or interest in some old lady. You know, throwing that out there. He had no problem getting women, you know? I said you had no problem getting women.
Hey, Ashley, tell him thank him for it.
Let you tell it.
Does it have to be questions?
No, that's what's up.
Okay,
Comments,
I have
questions or comments?
I have
If
to
you
read
want.
it down.
Okay.
Okay.
What's good about it, Sagan? What's good about it, Sagan? When I was in high school and I was around 16, 17 years old, I looked like a young Marvin Gaye.
All right, hold on. Here's someone else.
Hi, Ronnie. I don't have a question, but I do have something that I wanted to tell you. My name is Daria. I just wanted to say God bless you and continue fighting because this whole thing is just weird. And I'm going to do anything I can to help you.
Say it slower.
I'm sorry. My name is Daria, and I'm in the class that you're speaking to. And I just wanted to say God bless you and continue fighting. And I'm going to do anything that I can to help you.
You hear that?
Yeah, hold on.
Okay.
Yes. God bless you.
Thank you.
You got it. I give praise and honor. I give praise and honor to the Creator every day.
Yes, sir.
Every day. I know ain't no way in the world I could come for 42 years without some time. Is that a privilege? Yes, I give. Thank you. I thank you. Yes, God, for your concern, your prayer, and your support. Anyone that would want this willing like to me, ask me any questions. I don't care what it is. Ask me anything you want to ask me. Feel free to discuss my case openly with me. My document is online. You have 30 seconds remaining. I don't have nothing to hide. I'm not trying to hide anything. My documents are online. If you ever want to me, you want to write to me, you want to ask me any kind of question, I'll answer your question. And I will respond. I want to thank the class. I want to thank the professors that allow me and my wife to present this to you today. Please read my case.
All right, y'all. So, everybody pull out a piece of paper, and I want you to reflect to Ronnie. Not to me. I'm not reading it. Just I want you to capture what whatever you caught out of it. Quick summary.
Oh, and Ronnie too. So the paper has my direct cell phone number on there. And literally, if it's regarding Ronnie Long, I'm available 24/7. Doesn't matter. Usually text before call because I don't answer numbers I don't know.
Everybody write that letter because we're gonna give it to her. So the next time she sees Ronnie, she'll give it to him. So if you didn't want to ask, or you're a little uncomfortable, overwhelmed, just a little shy, whatever, put it in the little letter. No more than a page, just whatever it is. If it's something just, we're praying for, whatever you want to say. I'm not here to tell you what to say. But all those letters, just the interaction he gets from young people, it gives him life. That brother went to prison. I was 2 years old, man. He went to prison before all of you were born. Shoot, he went to prison when your parents were probably around my age. So just, write to him. I appreciate it. Everybody that's present today obviously got rights. I'll give you guys extra credit towards them. So.
Yeah, and if you guys, he can call you directly, no charge to you if you want to ask him questions. Unfortunately, it's in 15-minute increments, but you just have to shoot me a text or email. And yeah, everything's available. The freeronnielong.org is the central location, has everything, but I also have all of his court documents scanned, so I can email them off too if anyone wants to see anything. Because like he said, he has nothing to hide. And he really has. I mean, it's really frustrating because it seems like the more we keep fighting and getting more involved in like the wrongfully convicted community, it's like Ronnie has a double whammy because his case is political, but then he's also a black man. Because yes, the white people who are wrongfully convicted get a lot more help and a lot more awareness than than the black people who are. And then even so, I mean, Ronnie, he was in prison with Ronald Cotton, Daryl Hunt, Dwayne Dale, Greg Taylor, Joseph Sledge. I don't know if he was with Willie Grimes. I think he was. But, I mean, so he's been in prison with a lot of people who have since been exonerated. I mean, was it Benjamin Chavis or Travis? I don't want to say his name wrong, but he was in prison, central prison with Ronnie in 76, and he told Ronnie when he gets out he won't forget about him. And I've reached out to him several times with no success. So he just keeps hitting roadblocks, which is really frustrating. And it's just kind of like, why? It makes no sense. And I drive his attorneys nuts with all my questions.
Who accused him? What was her name?
Juddy Boss. She passed away, I think, last year, but she was connected to the Cannon Mills family. She was a widow at the time, but her deceased husband was an executive accountant for Cannon Mills. And Cannon Mills, literally, they used to be the world's largest producer of towels until they sold the mills when he was, 2008. So, I mean, essentially, we all would have used towels that came out of there. Definitely your parents and everything. I mean, they actually incorporated the city of Kannapolis, which is right next to Concord. They actually created the city of Kannapolis. And there's a whole bunch of mill houses. I mean, the police used to go pick up their checks from the plant. I think it was Plant 2 in Kannapolis. And I think the jury was all white, and 4 of the jurors were actually employed at Cannon Mills at the time, which would be a conflict of interest. And like he was saying, the detective Eisenhower, who personally handled the evidence, was unrelated, was later sentenced to federal prison for stealing checks from the mail and for fraud. To show you a little bit about his character.
Just on the top, if you put your name, just put Intro to Justice so he knows which class. Okay. And once you're done, raise your hand and I'll scoop it from you.
Oh, yeah.
Good. For me or? Okay.
Oh, that's what I was thinking.
Well, the jury selection was actually completely illegal because it was the sheriff, and then they had the jury commissioner, which I have the documents where he went through and just redlined everyone, saying, "Well, I know them personally," and I mean, they even interviewed the jury commissioner, saying, "Well, isn't it your job to select them?" And he's like, "Well, the sheriff is very familiar with everyone, so he did it." And then one of the jurors that they were doing for the pool, the attorneys asked him, "Can you have an open mind?" And he said in front of all the other jurors that were up, he's like, "Well, we wouldn't be here if he wasn't guilty." And so although they say, well, disregard that comment, I mean, people aren't going to disregard it, And there was a juror who was interviewed later saying that they were basically taken in and out of the courtroom, so there's a lot of stuff that they didn't hear regarding the evidence.
I was just curious how you
So I was living in his neighborhood in Concord in 2013. I didn't know
case gets misplaced.
Oh, yeah. And my friend was murdered, and at his funeral, a neighbor told me to Google the name Ronnie Long. And I was like, okay. And I kind of forgot about it. And the next day, I'd seen her husband and was like, oh, she told me to Google something. And he said Ronnie Long. So then I Googled it, and I won't say my exact thoughts, but I was just like, whoa. I really felt bad for him. I mean, I was like, I don't know how he's even still alive right now because I had booked and bailed out. Sorry, I can't do overnights. I mean, jail, prison, it's definitely not anything like you can imagine. And so I just reached out to them because I knew you could find their address online and write them. So initially, my only intent was to help, and then, I don't know, life happens. And I initiated everything with him, too. He wanted to wait to get married and all that stuff, but I wanted to have more rights, because if something happens to him, I can at least, go to the hospital, because he just had double hernia surgery, and then they just put him back in general population. And right now he's in an open dorm. So kind of dangerous, and it takes a while to recover from that. But they obviously don't care, and I mean, there's no special treatment whatsoever for that. So kind of using an idea situation, and it's been an interesting road, I guess. I understand now why he wanted to wait, because some people think I'm fighting for him because he's my husband, but I'm fighting for him because he's innocent. First.
This was a project. So Dr. Nation, in her courses, she makes part of the requirements is for the students to do projects. So we had students do letter writing campaigns, creating blogs, and one of our alum here, Mr. J.D. Poe, brother J.D. Poe, did a poem. I didn't realize he was lyrically gifted this way, but anyway. So check it out, y'all.
Who is Ronnie Long? Is it me? Is it you? A cold case gets misplaced and somehow they lost the truth. Is it a race against races? These poor black faces when it comes to these cases. I'm tired of these fixed interrogations. When he's up on the stand, he clenches his hand. He screams, isn't every shadow black? Even on the white man. Are we not equal? Am I less of a person because of my skin? In this game of life, am I not built to win? Years of oppression, years of depression, and that the litigation is still at their discretion. These people are dying, these mothers are crying. Why does it seem like history is rewind? Poor Mr. Long, his song fell on deaf ears, a wrongful accusation of 39 years. Will I be next? Maybe you, or you. I am Ronnie Long. What about you?
He took great pride in that. So for those of you that eventually will take Dr. Nation's class, that will be incorporated into the project.
Oh, and Ronnie Long will die in prison if he does not get help. Just so FYI. So that's why it's important. I mean, that was their plan, but I mean, he literally, unless he gets some type of relief through the courts, and he's kind of on his last leg because of the great way that the courts work. So, I mean, that's the reality of it. Because he's been up for parole since '87, but every single year they send him the same generic letter denying him parole as well. And then, do you still have a question? Mm-hmm. I mean, based on all the evidence and everything we have, yes. I mean, there's absolutely no reason. However, the more you learn about the courts, the more you realize that they don't really work based on facts and evidence. I'm telling you, it's crazy. It makes me very upset that it's literally about feelings, because the judges, the DAs, and the defense attorneys, they're all golfing and stuff together, and it's true, outside of the courtroom. So it's like, they're like, oh, well, Judge so-and-so doesn't like this, so I'm not going to do this. We're going to, I don't want to upset him with this because then he might use it against me in my other cases. It's literally, that's how it works. I mean, and I get that the courts are run by people and we're imperfect, but at the same time, they're supposed to be run by people who are held to a higher standard, who are able to separate, their personal feelings and emotions and be able to focus on the facts and evidence presented. And so, fortunately, that's not the case. And yeah, the former congressman he was talking about is also now the chairman of the North Carolina GOP, which he got that position kind of in a messed up move when they kicked the other guy out. But Robin Hayes, he married into the Cannon family, so he's not biologically related, but he is an heir to their $250 million fortune. And he said that as long as she is alive, Ronnie will never walk the streets a free man. So then, of course, when she passed away, we reached out to him and was like, hey, she's dead now, so what's up? And he was like, well, it's complicated. Yeah, it is complicated because you guys put the wrong man in prison, and you know it, and you've known it since '76. And we really do believe that everyone was involved in keeping him in prison. Even his original attorneys, because they wouldn't ask about the evidence. He was sitting there saying, ask him, ask the doctor. They didn't even want to cross-examine, the doctor who conducted the rape kit.
Well, they're going to you anyway, actually.
Let's wind it up.
Mark it down.
She has another kind of appointment. You have a question? Yeah.
His surgery, like, are you guys fighting to get him loose or get him help?
Oh, yes. So, I mean, there's really not much you can do. I mean, I'll put a post up and have a bunch of people call down to the administration offices in Raleigh. You know, we just blow up the phone lines, but a lot of times they don't answer. And then you got to go to the regional offices. But, I mean, there's really nothing much you can do other than try to raise hell and put it out there publicly, you know, because he is in prison. So
They don't, and we're going to cover this, but they don't make too many accommodations. I mean, yeah, medical wards, the temporary kind of recovery things, but it's, you know, it's not, you know, the reality of it is when you're incarcerated, you just got to suck it up. I mean, you can have a heart attack, they do a bypass, they don't put you back in general population. And you got to hope you don't get stabbed because you got to beat somebody. There's no special accommodations unless your attorneys can really fight and they're in the corner. For Ronnie Long, he's in an incredibly precarious situation because all the leadership in the state don't like him. It's not just another black male who killed somebody. It's a black male who killed a prominent white woman eons ago. And all of her people are politically positioned roles here in the state. And they control everything. So unfortunately, unless you're, you know, mentally incapacitated and they'll send you to some sort of wing or unit or facility for that, medically, if you have one leg, if you're in a wheelchair, I mean, you're going to be with everybody else. And we'll talk about that more in depth. Listen, hey, I appreciate you guys. Ronnie really likes, you know, he likes to read these, man. I mean, you know, just imagine. You guys get frustrated when the internet's out and you're stuck in your room for the weekend because you can't go home or watch something or be on social media. This man has been locked up 42 years now of his life, man. You know, in ailing health for something he didn't do. Damn. How much more injustice can one endure? He's already served his sentence for all the sentence. Honestly, if he was in another state, he'd already be released.
murders have come and gone.
Murder's the only life sentence. This dude is doing life and the people, you know, in theory, were still alive. That's injustice. So let's thank Ms. Long, Maurice, thank you guys. And for many of you, you will take corrections eventually, and you'll get more into the corrections and understanding some of these complexities. You guys are excused. I see you guys Monday. Have a good week.